This is Miles and Nicole with the Albemarle Observer. We're with Kevin Howard with the Chowan County Manager, and we are going to talk about some people's favorite topic, revaluation, and maybe you'll sort of touch on updates the county may have and other things. To start off with, Nicole and I have written about this, that reval. I can almost see the 38 to 42% number in my head now. But what I'm going to ask you about is explain reval, how it's, as far as I know, revenue neutral. It's not, I mean, yes, there's going to be money, but it's not like we're raising taxes 38%, right?
Correct. And when we talk about revenue neutral, that's what that does is when we do the percent of budget, we do this every year, not just on a revaluation year, is to bring in the same amount of money as we received the year before. What will that tax rate be? So this year is a much broader gap between what will be needed to bring the same amount of money and what we brought for this current fiscal year. So when I present the budget this coming Monday night, I'll present in the manager's thing. There'll be a discussion about revenue neutral, and it'll give an amount for what that is. And that what that number will tell us, to tell everyone, is to bring in the same amount of revenue, property tax wise, as we brought in for fiscal year 25-26. The tax rate needs to be X, and the current tax rate is Y, and then it shows the difference in those two.
Mr. Hill, the tax administrator, gave a presentation, I think it was in the last couple of weeks at council, and I saw, I'm just going to say it like normal houses, not the grandiose sort of things. And I'm like, good God, it didn't go up 10,000, it went up 70, 50. It wasn't just a little blip in the road. How do you explain how like normal houses were for people like me that don't have, you know, the gables and everything else? How does that happen?
That was the biggest part of the market in the last 4 years. The more reasonable priced houses, $200,000, $300,000. That's the largest part of the market. So we saw much more growth in that. You had more people looking for houses like that. So well, what we can tell, people will spend a little bit more to try to get a more cost appropriate house for their budget.
Now, on that note, I noted that, you know, things in Edenton being what they were, housing prices have increased because let's be realistic, Edenton's a hot place to live. A lot of people from everywhere are going, I want this small town vibe. So that's sort of happening at those larger homes that are by the water and everything else too. So their prices are going up, maybe not even as much actually, I saw from his presentation, as some of the normal priced homes. It's like the normal priced homes, 50, 70, and then the big giant ones, they wouldn't have as much of a bump. Though they did go up some. So this is, to say revenue neutral, we're not looking at, the county's not going to collect a bucket of taxes off of this. It's basically just everything's going to be more or less the same after everything is said and done.
Pretty much. I mean, we had the budget process, so the board's got to take what our needs are, our costs, and then look at that while they're putting the budget together, and they'll decide how close can we get to revenue neutral and make things work. It's the same process every year. It's just that this year instead of having to raise your tax rate, we're going to reduce our tax rate. How far can we go and make our budget work?
Okay.
That makes sense.
And just to point out, the revaluation is different from the property tax. You're not necessarily, if your value went up, you're not going to necessarily see your property tax.
Correct. And the way that will work is, depending on your property, we could go revenue neutral, and some people could still see a tax collection increase because their property went up more than what the average was, if that makes sense. Or if it went up less than the average, they may see a decrease in what their property tax is.
I think the tax administrator said they more or less, as best as they can, go out through the county, make judgments. Because I got somebody that sent me an email today saying, my friend's property taxes are actually lower than they were last year, but mine are 500 or whatever it was more. How do you explain that? So, which is what we're doing with this video. So this isn't I don't mean to, because everybody knows I'm a fiscal kind of guy. This is not like a 4-alarm fire kind of thing. This is just, this happens, well, I guess in this case, every 4 years. It used to be every 8.
And we did it, I first came here in 2014, we had just finished a revaluation the county had. Our values actually went down, because it was after 2008, the real estate property going down.
Yeah.
So when we did another one 4 years ago, you had the fact it went down, and then after COVID, the market here took off. And so it was an 8-year cycle that just saw tremendous increases. So at that time, the board said, well, we need to kind of level this wave out. So let's do it every 4 years so that each increase, if it continues to go up, the increase won't be quite as much as it was if we waited 8 years. The problem is the market was on the way up in 2022, so it just continued up, and so in 4 years we had almost as much an increase as we had over that 8-year period.
It's not
Previously.
it's not just Chowan County, right? It's
No, sir.
like across the board.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know, so, because we cover lots of others. So this isn't just a thing here. I mean, is there a deal, I think I saw this somewhere, where if I'm a senior citizen, can I get a break on my taxes or anything like that if it goes from whatever it is to whatever the new?
If you get there is a homestead exemption and a veterans exemption. Now that's based on income and based on different criteria. So I would encourage anybody that thinks they may qualify to come to the tax office, they can apply for that. Yes.
If you I think you said, or maybe it was a tax administrator said, if you dispute the changes, you can appeal it, right? You can
Correct.
say, hey, my $50,000 house should not be worth $200,000 because somebody moved in from wherever. So
Yes, there is an appeal process. We're in that process now. The board opened up the Board of Equalization Review their last meeting. There is I think May 15th. I wish I had written it down. Is the deadline. So I would encourage you to get the application in if you think there's an issue, because you can get the application in, and then we can ask you for more information if we think we need it. But getting the application in is the key prior to that deadline.
So you think, if you're a senior citizen, your taxes aren't going to go off over the top and you're going to be kicked out. There's still remedies, unless you're making millions of dollars, and it don't matter. But
Yes.
if you're somebody like me that isn't making millions of dollars, and you're not going to be kicked out of your house. They'll work with you. They'll go to your property, assess it. I remember there was a case in Hyde County where the guy's like, we've lived on this same farm for 100 years. A lot of these buildings are kind of, I don't want to say decrepit, but they were like 1930s, and suddenly we got a $200,000 boost. We can't afford it, and the Hyde County folks came down.
Yeah, we're
Generational farming. It's not fair.
Yeah. Well, the revaluation is a broad look. Where when you have an appraisal done for your house when you're going to sell it, they're coming in looking at everything. It's a much more detailed appraisal. So there is room for error in that. We don't go inside the houses. We're just going by the way it looks on the outside, what we think is there. So you need to really look at that description that you receive and make sure that what you have is there, and then we can make changes based on that. I do warn folks, when you come appeal, we're looking at it. Most likely it would go down, but there is a chance that it could go up based on relooking at that property. That's very rarely that happens, but that is a possibility. I don't want somebody to come in thinking it's going to go down, and then they find out, there was an error made and we didn't count your third bedroom or something, and we have to add that in. So,
do you have any questions? Because this was your topic for 2 weeks before I covered that council meeting the other week when Hill showed up.
So the tax rate itself, when you're going for revenue neutral, it takes into account inflation and all of that kind of stuff?
No, the tax rate, when we do the calculation for our revenues, we take the revenue for this year and divide it by what we're bringing in per penny, and that tells us what the tax rate would be to be revenue neutral. Just an example, say it's $600 million is what we brought, or $6 million is what we brought in, and then the new tax rate was $300,000 per penny versus $200,000 per penny. We divided 6 million by 300,000, and that gives us the new tax rate. So that will reduce the tax rate by a third, basically, for that.
Just because she brought it up the other night, one of the speakers during public comment, will timber mill affect the tax rate or do anything like that? I know we're not, it just started, so in the midterm or later when it's paid off or whatever.
Yeah, timber mill, we did an economic development agreement, so they're getting a tax, a grant back to them. They pay their taxes and then we give them money back. There was a total amount for that. It was 13 million and some odd. And that's done over, we're giving them a 75% grant until that $13 million is met. And then that comes on. Now we're estimating that to take about 7 years, based on what they're paying. But if our tax rate goes down, then what they pay goes down.
Okay.
And so that would vary based on that.
All right, so there's not gonna be 7 years from now, the tax rate's gonna.
I wouldn't. Yeah, 7 or 8 years from now, you'll see they'll be paying 75% more than what they're paying. They'll pay the full amount, or instead of 25%, they'll be paying 100%. What happens with that, I don't want to say. You know, we have needs that could come up that may require us to use part of that money to make a debt payment or something, and we plan that. Like we did with the high school, we planned try to keep them having to go up on taxes. We plan the new high school construction around other debts coming off. So paying off those debts, so we will assume that high school debt.
That's good, because Kirby was talking about that, just pay as you go. It's not like we're just gonna borrow a bunch of stuff and then just go willy-nilly. Is there a scenario, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, where tax rates, I should say, could be lowered? As I've never seen I think Kirby told me that they've kept it neutral or the same, basically. But I don't think I've ever seen a local government lower taxes, the tax rate.
That's always a possibility. We've lowered the tax, we will lower the tax rate. I guarantee you we will lower the tax rate as part of this evaluation.
Do you hear that? Lower the tax rate.
But the thing is lowering the tax rate doesn't mean what you pay in taxes will actually go down. Because if revenue neutral is 50 cents, say we're paying 67.9, I think right now, 69.5, somewhere up there. Say revenue neutral was 50 cents, so the tax rate's going to be dropped, 17, 19 cents to be revenue neutral. But if our expenses are higher, and we have reasons for it to be higher, I'll go into those in a second, then that rate will actually may be higher than that. So the tax rate will come down, but what is paid in taxes will actually go up. And some counties budget around revaluation. Now they'll find that tax rate where they can go 4 years without having to raise taxes, and then just adjust their revenues based on the new revaluations, instead of going up and down the tax rate.
We've got, it's been a while since I've written the article from last year. I wouldn't say the lowest, which I think is Perquimans, but one of the lowest, because I think across the sound, it's in the 70s, 80s, something like that. Across the board, it's not just one county. And I think here it's in the upper 60s.
Yeah, I think we're 69.5. I should know.
And Albemarle Plantation's the one, I'll just say it, it's floating Perquimans County, and they're getting, we drive through there periodically, it's like, oh, they're getting more stuff coming in. To segue, speaking of money, let's segue to budget, because it's about budget season, or it is budget season. Budget season was where to our readers, which they basically prepares their budget, and then the board approves it, discusses it, approves it in June, I think, right?
By June 30th.
June 30th. And so the next few months, they're going to be discussing how much to allocate to this sheriff's department or elections or schools or whatever. So you want to expand on that, because it's going to be a thing.
I'll present the budget this coming Monday meeting. I think it's May 4th. Is that right? I'll present the manager's budget, proposed budget to the board. We will set dates for public hearings. Well, the public hearing will be set a little bit later, but for the budget workshops, we'll set dates for those, hopefully. We usually meet 3 or 4 times before they get to a final budget, and go through the entire thing. 2 things weighing heavy on this year's budget. One is our jail situation.
Yeah.
You know, we're faced with having to either build a jail or become a member of, right now we're working strong with our district jail to join that. There will be an increase in our budget because of that. So that's weighing heavy on the budget and where our tax rate will be, but it's a lot cheaper than if we built our own jail. And then another thing is, if everybody recalls, the federal government reduced what they funded from Medicaid and SNAP and some other programs that our DSS handles for the state and federal government. So they're handled locally. The funding comes from federal and state government, but what they did was they reduced the amount of money they're putting into the program to push it down on the states to pay more. And from what we're seeing, the state's going to turn around and push that down on the counties. So we will have, it's not going to be the next fiscal year, it'll be the next 2 fiscal years because of the way the federal budget,
Yeah.
the way it works, it doesn't take effect till October. So we're looking at a $500,000 increase just to cover those costs. Plus, they not only did they reduce the amount of funding, but they increased the criteria to make sure they stayed eligible, to check that, to make sure you don't have fraud and stuff. So that puts more on the employees. So we're not doing it this year, but probably for the next fiscal year, we may have to hire additional staff to handle that additional workload.
It's like one of those like unfunded mandates that Commissioner Kirby talks about.
That's exactly what it is.
As a role, Chairman Kirby, a shout out. He is a very strong opponent of we call it unfunded mandates coming from Raleigh at all other governments. And basically it's like, oh yeah, in addition to what you're already doing, you got to do this much more. But we're not giving you any money to do it. You got to do it out of your own pocket or whatever. And that basically for rural counties, it adds up because, you know, instead of having whatever you got in the classroom, because I'm a little more in tune with that, you got to have all these other things. Instead of having the water doing this, it's got to do all these other things. So it can be quite expensive. And then there's the talk of the, I don't want to call it reforming, but mucking up property tax collections and that thing that's going on in Raleigh. But we'll save that one for another day, unless you want to.
I don't know a whole lot about that right now. They're talking about changing the laws to how counties collect property taxes. As we get in our budget process, I'll present more hard numbers to the board to show them how it affects us. But counties, more so than municipalities, were created to provide state services at the local level. DSS, court, we help maintain the court system. Education, there's a local, the current experience we provide, and capital for education. Health department, we don't have a county health department, but that's one of the expenses we have to provide funding towards. Just most of what we do is mandated by the state in some way for us to provide. Now we can choose at what level we want to provide that, how much money goes to it, but it's all required by the state. So if they start limiting the revenues we have, it's going to be hard for us to provide those services, and then the additional services we provide, such as recreation, planning. We don't have to have planning as far as that goes, zoning and stuff like that. Senior center, these are things we do because it's what the citizens want us to do. So if those costs go up and we have a hard time finding revenues to meet what they want us to spend on their programs and still provide the electives, I guess, a good way to put it, the things the citizens want that are kind of extra, it's going to be detrimental to those programs because we just won't have the revenues to do both.
Let's end this on a, I don't know, I always like to end on a positive note as possible. Reval, it's a thing, but it's not a 4-alarm kind of fire thing. So just give me a happy, maybe not happy, but reassuring maybe might be the right word.
Well, I guarantee we're not going to stay, we're going to reduce our tax rate. I know that. I'm far enough in the budget before I present it today, we're going to reduce the tax rate. my proposed budget will reduce the tax rate. The thing is, we just said we have things coming up, and next year and beyond, we know are coming. So, how do we set that rate to provide what the citizens want? And that's the key. We're trying to provide what the citizens want here. So, it's not the end all for everyone. We're going to do the best we can. I think our board does a good job of weighing. I will say the last reval, it's you don't like folks having to come in who are seniors who have expenses are going up, and what they bring in does not go up. So it's really hard on us and everyone else to see that and try to react. But all of our rules and law, what we go by is based on state. The state tells us how we handle everything. And so they're trying to change that with what they're doing on the state level. We would just prefer them take a more kind of step back a little bit and take a slower approach to it, and let's look at a bunch of options together instead of just coming down and laying down a mandate saying you're going to have to do this. Because there's things we can do to the homestead exemption, the veterans exemption. You can raise those income limits and help a lot more people that way than just changing how we do our tax rate.
Some of the higher tax rates, could you explain why some counties have higher tax rates than others? Is it because I know that in Terrell County, it's a population thing. They don't have enough properties to tax, so they have to charge that much.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the same situation in Chowan?
Well, it comes down to your total assessed value for your entire county. Having worked in Hyde County and Ontario, both of those counties deal with having large tracts of land and property that are federally or state owned. So you can't tax that. So that reduces the amount of that property they have to tax just to get off the bat. So their tax rates are going to be higher just because of that. Then the value of the property you do have. Do you have waterfront homes? Do you have larger homes, like we have here or Quimens has, that help bring that value down? How big is your industrial base? We're blessed with a pretty large industrial base here, so that helps with that as well. So it comes down more towards the value of your property than anything, the total assessed value for the whole county.
If we have a bunch of people move in, I think I've written about housing developments that are at least proposed, planned, same with Gates and other areas. Long term, with more people coming in, you can spread the tax base out. Property values, I guess, sort of be affected because building housing development. Will that help?
Yeah, it helps. The issue with homes, in a lot of cases, is say you have 100 homes built, $200,000 a piece. There's a value there, but you have a lot of services that go towards those homes. But if you have an industry come in, or the windmills, for example, come in, there's not a whole lot of services for those, but there's a large value there. So that's why the windmills that's going to be a big change for us when that agreement's paid off and we start bringing in those revenues.
So all is good. It's moving along. And I will say it's a very you usually put out a pretty conservative budget. You're not going to try to buy a Death Star or anything like that. It's every budget story I've written, it's right down the line, a very conservative budget. You do a good, I'll say it because I've seen the other budgets in the other counties we cover, and they're doing pretty good too. I don't want anybody going over up, but it's a very conservative budget here. It's right to the bit. There's no extravagance. You got anything else?
When do you think the workshops will be, and are those open to the public?
Yes, they're open to the public. I don't have dates yet. The board will announce those dates as part of the meeting on Monday night.
And some of them were during the day, but there was a lot of them last year. Are they going to be sort of toward the back end of the day?
We'll probably set 2 or 3 dates, and we have them during the day. Just one reason is we have staff available, so they're meeting with department heads, so everybody's here. And it's such a long amount of time. You're fresher during the day than you are at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So
agreed.
We'll establish at least 2 dates, probably 3 dates. And if we don't have it resolved by then, usually what we do is we recess and then we'll announce the next date at that meeting. So,
I'm been an Albemarle Observer Report. Please hit our site, like, subscribe, do all that, so we can do all that. So thank you much, and thank you very much for your time.
and just going back to the deadline for the applications, please check our website. It's
Yeah.
got a deadline on there. So and the forms you would need to do that.